Click the links to join the channel here over at Subscribestar. So Mike Barron, this is about the Punisher and the absolute just destruction of the character. But Mike Barron has got a comic called The Private American on Indiegogo. And it's kind of like what the Punisher should be. So rest in peace to the Punisher. There's no way they can have a character like the Punisher in current year, or even really within, I don't know. I mean, post 2016, absolutely not. And then somewhere within the past 10 years, you just can't have characters like this. So they're going to have to find a way to change everything about the Punisher. The silicon rich waters dripping through carbon, and it's like, oh, so after how many years you turn a piece of wood into the carbon replacement? It's like, yeah, but it's not the same thing. It's like, well, we're gonna take away his liberty devices and we're gonna give him. Let me guess, katanas. No, bigot. We're gonna give him a French sword from the 1200. No, it is katanas. What about an English sword, or like a Portuguese or an Italian sword, or the history of the sword? Who's the guy, Metatron, on YouTube? There's some YouTube guys who do sword history. It's like, no. We're going to go with a katana. What about a Chinese sword? It's like, even, no. Japanese katana. Well, I mean, there are others. No. Katana. Okay, I think the Japanese thing, the time has come and gone. Like, yeah, we've seen this. There's all of Europe to explore with different swords. You don't just, I mean, there's Northern Europe. They had the bigger swords. What are the broadswords and shit? Like, it doesn't just have to be the one. No. Because that way we can have him like, well, nowadays you can't have him. I was gonna say dress up in, I don't know, like the Karate Kid or something, and have the rising sun type of stuff. It's like, oh, that's very problematic because Japan is nationalist, and you're appropriating the cult. It's like everything is confusing these people. It's like, oh, we can't have some cliche scene where he's have a tea ceremony and he's got two swords and then the rising sun bandana. It's like every 80s cliche. No, we can't do any of that. But it's fun. But no, you can't have fun. That seems kind of gay, actually. To live your whole life like that, where everything is just miserable, and they're always looking for someone to take offense at something. It's like it's got to be a miserable existence. And then you look at the SJWs and you realize, yeah, it is a really, really miserable existence for these people. And that's a funny thing someone else pointed out. It's like the art is not so hot. So yeah, of course they cocked the Punisher. You can't have a character like this. So from what I remember about the character, I think he started off in the early 70s, Italian mob conflict type of thing, where he turns into a vigilante crime fighter, which is problematic for the alt-left people who are running comics. They prefer supernatural type of antagonists. That way you don't have to deal with the street level crime for the obvious reason. So if you don't know anything about this character, imagine the premise: vigilante crime fighter in the gritty city, so fighting crime at the street level and then working his way up to the bosses. Oh, you really showed those people who had this stylized skull Punisher logo. You hate them so much. You could have just ignored it. That you changed the icon to a stylized skull motif with like a demon. You went from a human skull to kind of a demon hybrid type of thing. But I mean, so because people were using and you even wrote a comic where you dedicated the comic to talk about how much you hate cops or something. It's just, these people are so, like, let me guess, they live in like a 95% white area in a gated community or something. And they're just so ridiculous. Their strawman version of the world. It's really hard to take. So, it's current year. Yikes, my guy. Grass touching intensifies. So who are the street level criminals and who are the bosses? What do they look like? Don't say anything in the comics, but imagine in your mind's eye, what I just said. Now imagine a monthly comic coming out where Frank Castle is fighting those type of folks. Yikes, my guy. That just can't happen in current year. You should really touch grass. Because according to these Frankfurt School brainwashed bullshies, those criminals are actually marginalized and oppressed, and that is the current state of comics. Now, here's the thing. Jamal Agel, who's the guy he was teamed up with? Kwanzaa, I think, and Mark Waid, they did an United comic together. It was freaking horrible. About Second Amendment stuff in Arizona. But Mark Waid's version of Arizona was all blonde and red-haired people. It's like, Arizona is like 75% Mexican now. It's like your bizarro strawman version of the world is ridiculous. Yeah, I think it got canceled after 8 issues. It was so freaking horrible. Jamal Igle is actually right. Yeah, there's no point in writing the Punisher if you have to change everything about the Punisher to where it's no longer the character. Like you change his techniques and who's he going after, and it's like Italian mob bosses. It's like, well, that's a little played out. And I think he had like I think he had a 5.56 with a 40 millimeter underslung. I think that was his tool, and he might have had like buck knives and Bowie knives or whatever you call those things, as accessories. But no, we're gonna get rid of all that stuff. So you can't, drop a 40 millimeter in a mob boss's limousine or something. No, he's got to have a katana. Okay, well, good luck with it going up against an armored limousine. You're gonna have a rough time going through that. But that's you change everything about the character. So is it the Punisher? Just call him something else at this point. Anyway, so no, you can't have a guy like this in the current year. It just doesn't make sense because the criminals are marginalized and oppressed. In there, I don't. Does it make sense? It doesn't have to make sense. Which is why comics are over, and even why Hollywood is losing influence. Like financially, people confuse that. They go, but financially, it's doing pretty well. Yeah. You're selling fewer tickets, but you just raise the ticket prices, so the money goes up. But I mean, they have fewer influence. So, like a big movie selling like 20 million seats, would potentially have influence. That was the Mario Brothers movie. But as movies get smaller and smaller, they just raise the ticket prices. And so far, that seems to be an okay business model. But it means you're having less influence on people if you have to do that kind of stuff. So comics and movies are definitely losing influence because the stories have to be politically correct, and they've got to pass these, the equivalent of Bechdel tests type of thing for storylines and screen times for different characters. And when they deleted, I think Ms. Marvel with Spider-Man or something recently, and they called it fridging the character. So you look at them and you look at their worldview, and you go, okay, so what's the real world? How's this going to affect the stories? Like you saying you can't delete women, you can't have women die in the comics. No, especially not brown people at all. So the only people who can have any nuance of the story are going to be European males or maybe European females. Well, probably not, because I guess the Phrygian would be. So European males can be good and bad. They can do all these things because all the other characters have to be Mary Sue Purse puppies. Yeah, they're absolutely okay with that. You saw how they reacted to Little Mermaid. Some guys coming out and going, "It should have been set in Haiti." When they lit, it's like, are you insane? Are you just everything you say is so? I get what you're saying. Will that sell movie tickets, or will that sell comics? Because you saw what happened with the Woman King. I mean, that's essentially what you wanted to do with the Little Mermaid. Is you wanted because that didn't sell. It actually lost money. And they go, it's not about the money. That's where we are now. Anyway, so stories that have to have this like Bechtel test equivalent type of thing. It's like, so you got like a checklist of propaganda, Pravda levels propaganda. Yeah. And I mean, you can sit down, and you can watch a few movies, and you can tell what it is. It's all about what I just said. It's like every bad character is going to end up being a blonde-haired male, like every single time. Uh, does that make for good high-selling comics and movies? No. So that's where we are now, where I say like Hollywood and comics are really over because having a checklist makes for very boring, predictable shows. Mike Miller is a comic guy who wrote Lone Star. He had trouble getting his stuff. I don't know if it was Indiegogo or Kickstarter because I mean, I don't think Kickstarter because the commies over there said that the hero who was fighting gangs was problematic because the gangs were brown, but they're criminal gangs. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to make sense. In there, I think was that is that Asian lady with the purple hair? I think she just got fired. They're doing comic like Indiegogo and Kickstarter both have comic outreach, and you go, why do you need that? Why would you pay somebody for comic outreach? It's like just people sell their comics and have it organically come up by hot words associations for discovery. It's like no, we're outreach. And let me guess, the people you're outreaching for are not going to be people like Mike Miller or Mike Barron or Ethan or any of these kind of guys. It's going to be are you a diverse POC marginalized, all this kind of like Frankfurt School checklist, like yeah exactly, we're going to put those comics on the front page, and you look at them, you're like, so $5,700 for some I don't know, what do they call those comics? Oh god, they're really simple. Was it Steven's Universe comics? They're really really simple type of art, and it's like, but they're diverse and they're POCs. Like, so what's the storyline? What are the characters? And they look at you like you're crazy. Like, I just said they're diverse, but but like $5,700, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of demand for those comics. Did you not hear me when I said they're diverse, marginalized, and oppressed? It doesn't have to make money. These people really just don't care about these kind of stuff. Anyway, so their whole like they have to control the outreach in the comics, and whether it's comics or movies or whatever, to control this narrative is like basically blonde people are going to be bad, Christians are bad, nations are bad. It's all going to be, globalist found families. Actually, going to be stronger. You're going to have deeper roots and stronger connections when you're in a team with a bunch of strangers. That doesn't make sense. It's like, well, go watch Willow and She-Hulk and Witcher and Rings of Power. It's like, yeah, those are all horrible. Well, that's the direction of movies, and the same can be said for mainstream comics. Because, like, how do you have a Frank Castle running around fighting brown or black gangs? It's just impossible. So you're left with blonde motorcycle gangs who are smuggling new designer drugs into schools, or the Supreme type of blonde people, those kind of clubs who are committing endless hate crimes. Like, just, yeah, that's the real issue in Chicago, Detroit, Memphis, St. Louis, Oakland, LA. It's actually the blonde people who are doing that. Oh, okay. I mean, I know it's a fictional universe, it's going to be like the Gotham City type of equivalent, but it's just it's wearing a little thin, is all I'm saying. Or they'll have corrupt cops who are selling drugs, or blonde people. They're all going to be blonde in red hats, vaguely looking like MAGA, who are attacking trans people or Asian business owners, because that happens. Or a blonde right wing shock jock who will be inciting the cattle to awaken. And then they'll when they zoom in on the guy, will be spit flying, and you'll see he's like got green or blue eyes. Or blonde kids harassing brown kids online. It's something vaguely to remind the reader about 4chan, Gab, or Telegram. Or I have seen actually more than once redheaded bullies attacking POC kids in schools. Yeah, that's a level of cognitive delusion that these comic book writers are suffering from, where redheaded blue-eyed boys are actually the ones who are the school bullies or the drug dealers or plotting large-scale Malum and Say acts. I remember one where I think Ms. Marvel had to stop some evil guys from taking an airplane and redirecting the flight, so to speak, or something like that. And they're wearing ski masks, but if you look close, you saw that they had green eyes and blonde hair was peeking out from under the mask, because they didn't want you to think they were anything other than, people look like you. Because that's what happens. It's actually blonde Germans who want to borrow airplanes to crash them or to hold people hostage. It's really those crazy. They must be, you know what? They must be Christian nationalists, because that's the greatest threat to our democracy. Yeah, that's actually what happened 22 years ago. It was a bunch of blonde Christian nationalists who did that large scale Malum and Say event. Like, oh, it actually wasn't. It was, yeah, you get the idea. Can't even say it on YouTube, otherwise you'll be you got to strike for like hate content or something for facts. Yeah, that's incitement to hate. So yeah, obviously the whole thing is Weimar levels of insanity, where 90% of the blonde bad characters across the board are going to be blonde or red-haired people. Even in that Game of Thrones comic, Moms, I think by Emilia Clarke, the top evil boss lady is a blonde woman with piercing blue eyes. Or if you want a further example, please go read Immortal Hulk 1 or 11. They're so bad that I remember the issues 4 years later. They're insanely bad. And like when people tell you to give you a suggestion to read or watch something, I really mean that, because it's like the first page of Immortal Hulk 1 is a blonde-haired, green-eyed kid robbing a liquor store, and then he returns the money to his green and blue-eyed motorcycle gang. And you're like, what is going on with these people? It's like, are they going to make him Hispanic or black? No, of course not, because it's like Al Ewing would just get fired if he did that. So they have to strawman this universe, and like, I don't know if people around the world are reading this and go, oh my God, America sounds horrible. All these blonde people are robbing liquor stores, going in a liquor store and deleting 3 people. Yeah, that's not what happens. So this is where we are now, in this clowny, joker-filled world of anti-white propaganda. I remember diversity in comics got started. Comics are worse, way worse now. They're just like, that was. I don't think you could even make a channel about the stuff that he was covering back in the day, about how much these people hate Europeans and Christians. I don't think you could do it, because the machine, the Google machine, they don't want you noticing how much these people hate you. He kind of came along at the perfect time. Got a channel, made $1 million, and just kind of just swooped in there where you couldn't do that on YouTube nowadays, but the white pill is Odyssey and Rumble are coming along kind of nicely. Anyway, so they hate the Punisher because whether either they strawman the character so much and they make every antagonist blonde MAGA types, and it just looks ridiculous. It's like what mainstream comics look now. They just look freaking insane. Or they have them go after brown criminals, and then obviously they're not going to do that. So all the bad guys have to be Russian, Italian, German, Irish mobs, or blonde biker gangs, or corrupt FBI or cops. You get the idea. It's never drugs from the Middle East, opium trade, or South American marching powder. It's always going to be a blonde guy in a laboratory with a designer making designer drugs to smuggle to the inner city, or blonde biker gangs who are 3D printing, auto Glock clones and selling them to more blonde gangs who are robbing liquor stores and actually running the inner cities. Yeah, that's. I mean, they have this worldview. It's like they can't go outside it. Was why I say Hollywood and comics are over. Other than to keep IPs alive, there's no point in doing comics where every character, the antagonists, all either have to be, obviously blonde or red haired if they're human, or they have to be these supernatural antagonists, and it just kind of gets boring where you literally only have one bad guy who can have any nuance. Where you go, wait a minute, you can just judge like characters in comics without even reading the stories just by eye color. Yeah, that's how tight the correlation is. Because that's how much they hate you. Or like, wait, every religious figure who's shown is going to be of some Christian denomination. No imams or rabbis who are allowed to commit any bad acts whatsoever. It's like it's just so obvious, and it's like this kind of wearing thin. Yeah, how are comic sales doing? Not too well. So it's like, gee, you're fighting a Russian gang. Was that the John Wick where he's fighting Russian gangs, or Die Hard is a German large scale guy who does bad things at a large scale. Yeah, it's actually the Germans and the Russians who are like, that's ridiculous. Yeah, I know, but that's even that. When was it? Die Hard made in the '80s or something? Um, it's just about as tiresome as you can imagine. It's even more tiresome than that. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. See you guys on the next episode.